Welcome to the Providence College Podcast. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. Email podcast@providence.edu with questions or comments. Go Friars.
Welcome to the Providence College Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chittum, and I'm joined, as always, by PC producer and videographer Chris Judge, class of 05. Here at the Providence College Podcast, it's our job to bring you interesting stories from in and around the Friar family. And today we are joined by Associate Dean of Admission for Multicultural Recruitment, Karen Vargas. Karen has spent 13 years in admissions, 5 of those years here at Providence College. She works in different areas kind of around the country, most specifically Essex County in Massachusetts, Boston and Cambridge, as well as Puerto Rico and various other areas as well. Karen, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Well, it's good to see you again. I didn't include in the biography that we've known each other quite a long time.
We have.
So going back to my own admissions days, 13 to 14, 15 years ago.
Oh my, it's been that long.
I know, it's nice. For anyone who has been in the admissions world, they already know this, but college fairs are set up alphabetically almost always. I worked at Roger Williams at the time. You were at Rosemount. So we were next to each other at every college fair.
That's correct.
In New York and New Jersey, which was always fun.
It was. It's nice to come back together and work with you again.
There you go. Well, so what is life like for you now, right? So we're in mid-August right now. It is August 10th. So I'm assuming, trying to get ready for the fall travel season. So what does August look like for someone who works in admissions?
August is hectic right now. We're really excited to get off on the new fall travel season. There's a lot of excitement going into this new academic year. Class of 2021 is already in bed and about to start in just a few weeks. And we are prepping for class of 2022. And so the work that goes into that, preparing for college visits, preparing students for our high school visits, setting up interviews. I have the pleasure of recruiting students from the island of Puerto Rico, and so I get to go down with Raul Fons. Will be there in a few weeks, and just setting up those interviews, the high school visits, opportunities with the counselors. So it's hectic right now.
Right. So what exactly is that when you say doing high school visits and meeting with students? What exactly does that mean?
Absolutely. So we schedule visits at the high schools where we have a majority of students that are interested each and every year. And then we'll work with our high school community to make sure that they're privy to the changes at PC. So the updated numbers, stats, statistics in terms of GPA, SAT, and so on. And then we have the opportunity to meet with interested seniors and sometimes juniors to share with them the changes in terms of the admission cycle, updates from our end for the common application, and then certainly how they can engage and put their best foot forward in this process. So we spend anywhere between 20 to 45 minutes at a high school speaking with the students and or counselors and just giving them all this great information. We'll visit about anywhere between 3 to 4 high schools a day for anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks throughout this fall. And we're gearing up to start off right around Labor Day weekend. So it's right around the corner.
Wow. So you're like just on the road straight for 2 months.
It never ends. It never ends. And this is very cyclical for us. We're prepared for this type of season. We know that up until November 1st, which is our first deadline, everyone is out on the road working with students, parents, families, community-based organizations, and so on. And then come November 1st, we hunker down and start reading applications. So this is the fun part where we get to be out with our students and getting to know them, working with them, and then we hunker down come November 1st.
So why is it important for you to be out on the road meeting with guidance counselors and students in person?
It's important for us to make sure that they're aware of the changes. There are a lot of changes each and every year. PC, for example, our application process has not changed, but the app volume has grown tremendously over the past few years. We had over 11,200 applications in this past cycle. And so we want to prepare students to not just know PC, but put their best foot forward in this process. So whether it's completing an interview at some point throughout the fall, if it's meeting an admission representative and learning about the process, sometimes students don't have PC on their list. And so it's good to meet someone, ask those intense questions, and then say, hey, maybe PC might actually be a great fit for me, and I should consider applying. I think for me in particular, because of my role and the work that I do, particularly with multicultural recruitment, access, and inclusion, it's important for me to have those connections throughout the community, both in our backyard in the local area, but also in some of the national territories. So I actually help quite a bit in other areas, whether it's in the DC area, working with KIPP high schools, working with the Cristo Rey Network on a national level, just came back from their summit in July, or if it's just working with our West Coast representative in California and making sure that those students know that there are some opportunities for fly-ins and visits this fall. There's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes. And so it's important for me to have that touch with the students, but also making sure that we're gaining a lot of recognition on the national level.
And I took a look at your calendar before we started, and I looked at like all color coded. It's like jammed up with stuff. I know you're probably gonna be filling it even more in as we go the next couple of weeks. So your travel's all planned out. You know ahead of time. Hey, at 1 o'clock on this Thursday, I'll be here. The following Wednesday, I'll be there. But for interested students who are at these high schools or in these areas, how do they know that you're going to be in town, or if say they're in Connecticut, that another counselor is going to be in town?
Correct. So yes, my calendar is color coded. I prefer to know which days I'm going to be in the Boston area and which days I'm going to be out in the North Shore. It's a lot of fun, but it takes a lot of coordination on our end. And we've been fortunate this year that many of the high schools have moved to an online process. And so it makes it easier for us to make some changes if we have to make those. So for me, when I build my schedule, I then reach out to students in the particular areas to let them know that I'm visiting their high school. And then we send a poster to each of the high schools with a confirmation letter so that the guidance officials know that we're coming out to visit and they can connect with us during that visit. Sometimes if a student has, for example, an AP English class and they can't get out of it, and that's the time that I'm visiting, they can come right before the class starts or right after my session ends and just say a quick hello, grab some materials, and make that introduction. So we make sure that the students know in advance as best as possible. If we're going to a college fair, we'll post it on our website so that students know if it's an open invitation to community members that they can come with their parents, friends, peers, mentors, and learn about PC, in addition to some of the other great colleges and universities that we'll be with.
So how do you know who to send like the notice out beforehand? Like what you said, you emailed certain students, say, hey, we're going to be in your area this day or whatever. How do you know who to contact? Because obviously this is before the application process. So how can you be proactive in that sense?
Absolutely. So students can always register online and join our mailing list. They can start as early as 8th grade with us.
Do people do that?
Yes. Yes, they do. And we encourage them to start early. We have a series where we work with our students as early on as the beginning of their freshman year. And then we start to communicate with parents in their sophomore year of high school. So we really want them to engage with us in this process. I don't think that you can wait until senior year to say, hey, I'm interested in applying to college now. Students are starting early and often. And so anytime that a student may want to visit, whether it's for an information session, a campus tour, an open house event, or anything like that, they will register online or they'll give us their contact information, and then we can get them up to date with what's happening on campus. So whether it's a high school visit, whether we're offering interviews in the area, we do that with some of our national territories, or if it's an opportunity, say like our fly-in program for first generation or multicultural students, we'll reach out to them and say, hey, there's this great opportunity. Why not think about PC as one of your options?
Right. All right. So you have you break it down, you have the visit to a high school, or your high school visit, where
Correct.
you can meet with students individually and in small groups, which is a nice thing. You have your college fair, which is usually almost like a free-for-all. The kids kind of walking around. You have 50 to 150 colleges at different tables, and there's a lot of access to a lot of schools, but isn't quite as intimate as the high school visit is. And then, a student coming to campus for a tour and to receive the information session and maybe meet with interesting parties here on campus. So with all of that being said, what would you say is like a to-do list, and just as compellingly, a not to-do list for students who are going to these different things, specifically the high school visit where they would meet with you, or the college fair? What are the things for them to keep in mind, and a good way for them to approach that, and things that they might want to stay away from?
Sure. I always tell students when they're at college fairs, it's a great way to introduce themselves to this process. And they may want to ask about GPA and SATs, and that's great, but it all becomes mush at the end of the day when you're going to 40, 50 different colleges at a college fair and you're asking them their SATs and GPA. You will not remember that at the end of the conversation, right? And so I think a college fair is a great way to approach it by asking more about the campus life, the community experience, what different opportunities a student might have in terms of a particular major, so internships, study abroad opportunities. I ask students always to avoid asking, tell me how good your bio program is, because I will never say that it's horrible. I always tell students, well, let me tell you what our students are able to do within the bio program: research, internships, study abroad experiences. And that tends to be a bit more of a connection with the student. I don't think any of us would ever share that our programs are horrible. And so we want our students to feel engaged in this process, right? And so I think the best way to approach a college fair is really to ask about the community experience, the campus vibe, and what a student is able to do within a particular major, right? High school visits are an opportunity for a student to really engage with their admission representative. And so whether it's just a quick introduction, hi, my name is Karen, I'm at this high school, I really just want to share with you that I'm truly interested in PC. These are the top 2 reasons why I came to visit this past fall, loved the campus, had a great tour, just wanted to say a quick hello. I think that's a great way to approach it. I think a lot of times students get nervous about the high school visit in that, you know, what am I going to ask them, or what should they know? And I think it's an opportunity, again, to learn about PC. For seniors in particular, it's to learn about the deadlines, what they need to be doing in the process early on. And I think for juniors, it's an introduction to what the process can be moving forward.
You bring up a great point in terms of the kinds of questions that are more useful than other kinds. It's not as if there's a bad question per se, but there's ones that kind of can be a little more illuminating, I guess. So even if they're not, especially someone's going to come to a college fair, they might not have a specific PC question and a specific, other school question, but to have a very pointed question within a certain realm, I can see that being very useful, kind of going in there, having done some research about like what they're possibly interested in and what sort of, effects that a school could have on them in particular.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times students approach this process in that they need to know everything up front, and that's not necessarily the case. And I think a lot of times it becomes information overload. And so if they pace themselves through this process and they give the opportunity to learn more about each institution and what makes each institution different and distinct in this process, that'll go a long way.
Now, how would you advise somebody who, obviously say they are really interested in the school, say, we'll use, for example, Providence College in this case. All right, so they're like, all right, Providence College I'm definitely applying. I feel really good about it. Still early, it's still the fall, so I haven't necessarily made up my mind yet, but I know that I have a very strong interest in this school. How should they approach you from a communication standpoint, kind of into the fall and then through the application process? And by say you, I mean, whether it's, you're the counselor they'd want to work with, or if it's somebody else in the office that has that region, what's the ideal communication between you and the student during that process? And how should they approach, again, kind of the to-do, not to-do list for, the best way to approach that?
So you bring up a great point. It should be between the student and the Office of Admission, right? And so while parents are always eager to be part of this process and we encourage them to be part of this process, the student should always be driving during this process. And so we encourage them, send us an email, tell us how they're doing, if there are any updates that they want to share with their admission representative. If a student doesn't know who their admission representative is, maybe we don't have the opportunity to visit their high school, they can always reach out to us. They can go onto the website and see who their admission representative is. And then let us know what questions they might have via email. Give us a call. Literally before we started this, I had a phone call and I had to ask you to give me a moment so I could advise the student in terms of next steps for the next few weeks. And that's what we do throughout the summer and throughout the next few months. We work with our students to make sure that they're aware of the process and what things they should be doing. Parents are welcome to reach out to us, absolutely, but we encourage a student to be engaged in this process. And so if there are any updates, if they want to submit a resume, if they're interested in coming for an interview, if they have interest in the theater program, for example, and they're interested in maybe doing an audition, we can help guide them through that process.
And what's your relationship with, or kind of the ideal version of your relationship with the guidance counselor community and at specific schools? How does that work? How does it play itself out? Not only in the fall, but during the entire year?
Absolutely. So I have a really great relationship with my counselors and from the different regions that I work with. And I've been fortunate that I've had the same regions for the past 5 years. And so folks know me and they know that if I ever have a question, I can give them a call. I have a great relationship with many of the counselors. And if there's a new counselor, I make that introduction up front. It's my responsibility as a territory manager to know my high schools, to know the curriculums that are available at each of the high schools. And if I ever have questions, I should be asking those. I should never make an assumption that a student has, for example, access to all 4 years of a language if they're in the Boston School District and they only have access to 2 years. I know that as a territory manager. But we like to see all 4 years of major subject areas that include language. And so, again, it's my responsibility to make that connection. Sometimes if I have a question about a student, if I'm advocating for them, I'll call the counselor and, get a feel for them. I recently had a student who reached out to me in June regarding enrollment at PC, had originally been admitted. And I reached out to the school counselor to say, hey, the student reached out to me. Can we chat about this? And it was such a great conversation. So I knew I had to advocate for the student till the very end. And it all worked out, which was great. And we got to see said student a few days ago, which was awesome.
Yeah, it sure was. And I can imagine that relationship between the admission staff and the guidance counselor community also being useful in determining who has a strong intent to attend school versus just applying, right? Especially with a school like Providence College, where you have an applicant base where they're going to apply to, the step better than I do, say 7 to 12 other schools. They don't feel necessarily the same way about every single school they apply to. So at what point do you kind of hear them out about the intent of a certain student as they go through the process?
I think we talk a lot about what demonstrated interest means in this process, certainly with the high school community and college counselors. And I think for them, it's important to know that if a student is truly interested in PC, either of the early decision cycles are the best way for a student to demonstrate that interest. And so when we have conversations with them, and they know that a student is bleeding black and white, they want to come to PC, we are their top choice, and they're not looking to compare financial aid packages, that an ED cycle might be a better fit. I always encourage students, if they're looking at PC and they know we're in their top 3 choices and academically they've been consistent, that early action is a great fit, but they should also be aware that it is the largest method for a student to apply, right? So we had our largest early action applicant pool in the history of PC this past year, and it continues to grow. And so if a student is really looking at PC as their top choice, early decision is the best method for them to apply.
Right. And then when you get into regular decision or early action, the demonstrate interest piece obviously it weighs a little differently because they're considering other schools. Or at least you can assume that they're
correct
looking at other schools.
And we love students applying through each of the methods. They have to find the method that works best for them. I think that as we've evolved as an office and as we're looking at students in terms of being good fits, academic, social, and spiritual on campus, we're looking for them to be engaged community learners. And so how can they highlight that on the application and which method is going to be the best fit for them?
That's a great point. And when I did the introduction, I mentioned you're the Associate Dean of Admission for Multicultural Recruitment. So obviously you do more than just that. But what does multicultural recruitment mean?
For us at PC, it means that everyone gets to be part of this initiative in terms of recruiting our highest and highest talented student in this process, right? And so it's not enough to say, hey, we're based in New England and that's where the majority of our students are coming from, but how do we become a more inclusive and diverse community? And so we do a lot of different things across the nation and internationally to attract students at a high caliber. And so whether it's recruiting in Puerto Rico or we're going down to Texas or doing something in California, there's some really great opportunities, but we all get to be part of this piece of the puzzle.
Right. And when you're recruiting from an area that's, that's basically just far away, right? Someplace that someone's going to have to fly over hundreds of other colleges to come to Providence College for a visit or ultimately attend. How much of that is, recruiting that individual versus just, kind of passing along knowledge about the school?
So we take the approach that every student matters in this process, right? And so whether you're working with a student locally or internationally, you want to make sure that they have the information. At times, they may not be the student that enrolls at PC, but they may share that with their cousin or their friend or their neighbor. And so being able to relay the appropriate information, what opportunities they have on campus, if they're coming from a distance, knowing that there's an airport in Providence, but they also have access to the Boston airport is really cool. And being able to share with them in terms of what they can contribute to the campus community, but what we can share with them throughout their 4 years at PC is going to be important. I think for us, when we talk about multicultural diversity, access, and inclusion, there's a lot of different pieces to this puzzle. So we talk about ethnic racial diversity, we talk about religious diversity, we talk about national geographic diversity. We want students to come from all different walks of life to be able to contribute and enhance this campus experience.
That's a good point, and I can see why that'd be a valuable thing. And I love how you kind of laid out the different ways diversity and what diversity could mean in different areas. Whether it's ethnic or geographic, or I'm sure you probably could make a list of probably 20 different things that could be included in that definition. So when you have different communities that you're doing outreach to, kind of in that model, do you feel like certain communities? Not that you have to tailor your message differently, but do you feel like you have to portray PC or highlight different areas of PC depending on the community you're talking to? Obviously, all of it's truthful, but is there certain ways that you frame it when you're talking to different communities?
I think every time you meet with a student, you always want to make that personal connection. So I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and when I meet with families from Puerto Rico, they will say to me, "Okay, Karen, what's the real deal? How will PC enhance my son or daughter's life? How will PC help my son or daughter be successful in life?" And we really talk about those personal connections, knowing that I'm a resource for their son or daughter while they're at PC, or knowing that, there are a variety of different folks across campus, but if they can't get someone, they can always reach out to me. Sometimes if they need a translator, for example, if someone speaks only Spanish and they're not fluent in English and they need to speak to someone immediately, knowing that they have that personal connection with someone is important. I think we always try to be 100% honest with our students and giving them what's appropriate for them. But absolutely, when I'm in Puerto Rico, it's a very different ball game. It's a totally different experience. We're meeting with students until 10, 11 o'clock at night, doing interviews, meeting with parents. Interviews include parents. And so we take that approach rather seriously to make sure that it's a family decision. We know that. If I'm recruiting down in the Boston area, I'm working with students and parents and counselors and community-based organizations. And so that can be a bit of a dynamic in terms of, if I've never worked with the CBO that the student is working with, getting to know the CBO and what they're able to do and how they're collaborating with the student. So again, that personal touch, making sure that the student knows that they're important in this process. And if they choose to come to PC, they're not a number, but they're a member of our community, is important. And we start that process early on.
And it's interesting, you said very early on there that when they come to campus, that you're a resource for them while they're here. Because I think it's easy to assume, and often rightly to assume, that the admissions team is focusing their efforts on the incoming students, as opposed to the students who are on campus right now. That's more of a student affairs or academic resources and things like that. So what is that process, I guess, individually for you in terms of maintaining those relationships,
Sure.
Not only during the application process, but their 4 years on campus?
Absolutely. We want to make sure that once they enroll at PC, that we're graduating them in 4 years. And so my office is a revolving door with students. Once they return and they're on campus full time, it is never a dull moment in this office. And we're talking about different things in terms of, what classes they should be exploring, how Civ is going. Are they thinking about their colloquium experience? What do they want to do when they declare their major? If they're struggling between majors, having that conversation. But then we also have the personal conversations. How's the relationship with mom and dad now that you're in college? That first trip home after a few weeks on campus can be very tough, a transition for both the parent and the student. Right? Because the students are up till 2, 3 in the morning. They could be studying with their peers, hanging out in the dorms, and then they get home and then there's a curfew or there's a time limit when they need to be home. And that can be a bit of a struggle between both sides. So encouraging students to have those open conversations with their parents, making sure that they're doing what they need to be doing to be successful in their first year and then moving forward through that. And then my students are great because I need their support in order to do the work that I do. And so whether it's the Pathways to PC program, which is our fall fly-in program for multicultural and first generation students, or it's one of our multicultural initiatives in the spring, I need their support in order to be able to do those programming options. And so I want to make sure that they know that I'm here as a support and a resource to them. And when it's their time to be able to pay it forward and help a student who's looking at PC and interested in PC, to show them what the PC experience is like and what it's like to be a friar on campus.
I love how you look at it, like you're taking the long game, like the long game approach, because you're not viewing it as, hey, this is a 6-month connection I'm making with the student. Hopefully it's a lot longer than that. Obviously, if things go well, keep that relationship going post-college, become somebody that you're just, friendly with.
Absolutely. I was recently, I would say maybe a little over a year ago, I was in Texas helping out with a program, and there's a PC graduate who worked with me for about 3 years during my stint here and her time here. And she's out in Houston. She's working with Amica in their offices in the Houston area, and we grabbed some dinner, and the first thing she said, I want some interns. Like, are there any students from the Houston area that are interested in, an internship or even a shadowing experience? Who do I talk to? How do I get connected? And it all started, I remember when she was interning with Amica here in the Providence area. Their offices aren't too far away from campus. And when she was looking for a job, she was just, going back home, not really sure what she was going to do. And now she's doing well, and she's enjoyed her time in the Houston area. She's really originally from Texas, and so it was nice to be able to go into the Texas area, have that PC connection in Texas, and now she's dying to have some PC alums or PC students working with her.
What a great story. Thank you for sharing that. That was nice.
Absolutely.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the podcast. Before we get going, are there any application deadlines students should keep in mind as they go through this fall process?
Absolutely. So here's my best recommendation. If a student knows that PC is one of their top 3 choices, academically, they've been consistent, and they know that we're looking at all 4 years of English, math, science with a lab, history, social science, and language. There are certainly some exceptions to the rule, and they can reach out to their admission counselor, admission representative for additional details. But they know, hey, PC's on my top 3 list, November 1st, early action, great way to apply. If a student knows 100% that PC's their top choice and their only choice, and they are not looking to compare financial aid packages, one of the early decision cycles could be a best fit for them. Early decision cycle 1 has a November 15th deadline. Early decision cycle 2 has a January 15th deadline. And then last but not least, if a student knows PC's on their top 10 or top 50 list, and they're looking to explore their options, they can keep the regular decision deadline in mind. We absolutely get tons of applications and great candidates from that cycle, and that also has a January 15th deadline. So we welcome all applicants, and give us a call if you have any questions.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Karen.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.